AITA for loving my ex's regret over my success after she left me? I am 29 years old. I am a software engineer, although now I am also a startup founder. This whole story started about 4 years ago, but the real drama exploded a short time ago. I was always aware that Caroline's family never really liked me. She is 28 years old now. I am not dumb. The signs were there from the beginning. We met in college. She was studying business at a fairly prestigious private university in New York, while I was at a state school on a full scholarship for computer science. My life at that time basically consisted of surviving on instant ramen and energy drinks while working nonstop on what I hoped would one day become a great tech startup. Our first meeting was pretty typical. We were in the library when Caroline accidentally spilled coffee on my laptop. Instead of getting mad, I made a stupid joke. Somehow, that moment ended up turning into a 4-year relationship that I thought was something serious. Her family never said anything directly. The Harringtons were too elegant for that. But the looks, those little smiles of disdain, and the way they always mentioned successful men from their circle when I was present made it very clear. When Caroline and I started dating, her mother still introduced me as Caroline's friend from college. Just a friend, even after 2 years together. Imagine that. At first, I thought Caroline was different, that she saw beyond the world she grew up in, which was full of inherited money, golf clubs, and that constant obsession with social status. She herself made fun of how rigid her parents were. She also rolled her eyes every time they talked about their country club drama. We spent a lot of time in my small studio apartment in Queens. The place had an annoying leak in the bathroom ceiling that the landlord never fixed. Even so, we cuddled on the futon eating Chinese takeout while watching Netflix on my old laptop. Caroline always said that money was not important to her. She repeated that she loved me, not my bank account. In the end, I discovered that money did matter, and a lot. Our apartment was nothing special. It was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building in an area of the city that was not exactly quiet. Sometimes the neighbors had shouting matches in the middle of the night, and other times they were incredibly loud in other ways. Sometimes both at the same time, around 2 in the morning, but it was our place. We decorated it with string lights, some posters, and several succulents that Caroline constantly bought, although in the end, I was the one who made sure they did not die. I also had a rescued tabby cat named Max. He had the habit of knocking over everything he found on the counters, but every night, he ended up sleeping between us. Caroline said she actually preferred dogs, but more than once I saw her talking to Max like a baby when she thought I was not looking. I think the beginning of the end started during a casual family dinner at her parents' huge house in Westchester. It was one of those absurdly luxurious gatherings where people wore watches that cost more than my car. Although, being honest, that was not very hard either. I drove an old Honda Civic with a dent in the bumper, and the check engine light had been on for a while. While they drank wine from bottles that were probably worth a fortune, they calmly talked about weekend getaways to the Hamptons or Aspen, as if it were something as everyday as my weekly visit to the laundromat. Caroline insisted that I go. She assured me it would just be a family gathering and that her parents wanted to get to know me better. I should have suspected something when she asked me to wear a blazer. I only have one, the one I wore to my cousin's wedding 3 years ago. Besides, it was already a bit tight on me. Startup stress and stress eating are real. Still, I put it on. I even borrowed some dress shoes from a friend for the occasion. But as soon as I arrived, I knew that this was not a family gathering at all. There were her father's business partners accompanied by their sons. These were men who already had successful careers in finance, law, or real estate. They were the kind of people whose LinkedIn profiles look like the exaggerated American dream. They had Ivy League universities, internships at Goldman Sachs, and fathers who call senators by their first name. You know the type. Conversations flowed completely naturally between investment strategies and European vacations. Meanwhile, I was still completely focused on my startup, with almost no social life, surviving on instant ramen and occasionally treating myself to a Chipotle burrito bowl, always with guacamole, because I am not a savage either. Clearly, I did not have interesting stories about summer houses in the Berkshires or ski trips to the Alps. It did not take long before the comments disguised as casual conversation began. So, Jackson, are you still working on that little tech project? Caroline's father asked while swirling his whiskey in a glass that surely cost more than my rent. It is a startup, I replied, trying not to sound defensive. We are in an early stage, but we are making progress. I did not mention that our last meeting with investors had been a disaster, nor that my co-founder and I had been working over 80 hours a week for weeks trying to fix bugs in the prototype. One of his friends let out a laugh. He was a guy with perfect teeth and a tan in the middle of winter. Tech is very unstable lately, he said. Are you sure it is a good way to invest your time? Maybe you should think of a plan B. He said it with a condescending smile, as if he were offering me valuable advice instead of talking down to me. I saw Caroline shift uncomfortably in her chair, but she did not say anything. That was new. Normally, she would defend me by saying that I was passionate about my work or that I really believed in what I was building. This time, she stayed quiet. She just took a sip of wine and stared at the huge floral centerpiece on the table as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. Then Spencer appeared. Caroline's mother introduced him with exaggerated enthusiasm, as if she were announcing the arrival of someone very important. Spencer just became a junior partner at Covington and Sterling, she said proudly, while practically pushing him toward Caroline. He is a corporate lawyer, graduated from Yale Law, and has a brilliant mind. It seemed like she was reading his professional profile. For some reason, Mrs. Harrington insisted that Spencer sit right next to Caroline. You two have so much in common, she said with a smile. Meanwhile, I was left sitting on the other side of the table with the strange feeling of watching my own relationship from the outside. The rest of the dinner basically became a constant humiliation. The conversation throughout the night kept revolving around the same thing. They talked about stability, secure careers, and already proven success. Spencer started talking about the bonus he had recently received. Who brags about something like that at a dinner party? He also mentioned the condo he had just bought in Tribeca and confidently explained his plan to become a full partner before turning 35. And I practically had nothing to contribute. Every time I tried to participate, someone would listen for about 5 seconds out of pure courtesy and then change the subject to something they considered more interesting. That was when I understood. That night was not a simple family dinner. It was a kind of audition. They were showing Caroline her alternatives. They presented serious men with clear futures and established careers. They did not want a guy like me who was still struggling to get his first big break. They were drawing, in front of everyone, the difference between the life she would have with someone like Spencer and the life she would have with me. I barely managed to endure the evening, but the worst part was not the comments disguised as politeness or the obvious comparisons. The worst part was Caroline. Not once did she say anything to defend me. Not once. Instead, she laughed at Spencer's jokes, asked him questions about his work, and seemed genuinely interested when he talked about law school or the expensive gifts he had received. Every action felt like a direct hit, as if she were saying without words that this was what she really deserved. And to be honest, at that moment, I felt her family was right. After all my effort, I had absolutely nothing to show for it. I had spent years chasing a dream that seemed to be going nowhere, while Spencer, with his tailored suits and 6-figure salary, seemed to have life handed to him on a silver platter. I hit rock bottom the day I ran into Caroline and Spencer at a downtown coffee shop. I was there picking up a food delivery order. Yes, that is how things were for me at that time. I was delivering food to survive. It was weird. I was standing in the same restaurants where I used to eat before, but now I only went in to pick up bags and hope the tips were decent. The air conditioning in my car did not work. I was soaked in sweat inside my t-shirt, and my phone was at barely 15% battery after a 10-hour shift. They were sitting outside, laughing, holding hands, and dressed as if they had just stepped out of a luxury ad. Caroline had a new haircut, clearly expensive and elegant, the kind you do not get at a cheap chain. Spencer was wearing sunglasses that were probably worth more than all the clothes I owned. At one point, Caroline saw me. She stopped mid-laugh, and our eyes met. For a second, I thought I saw something in her eyes, maybe regret or perhaps guilt, but it disappeared almost immediately. In its place appeared that polite smile people usually give to service workers or distant acquaintances, as if I were simply someone she had met a long time ago. That instant broke something inside me. That was the last day I accepted being a joke. I went back to Matt's apartment, deleted all my social media, and made a clear decision. No more self-pity. No more comparing my life to Caroline's perfect Instagram version. No more excuses. I cut out everything that distracted me. I removed social media, useless habits, excuses, and even feeling sorry for myself. I went into total rebuild mode. I slept barely 4 hours a night. During the day, I delivered food. At night, I worked stocking shelves at a supermarket, and every free minute was dedicated to rebuilding my startup from scratch. But this time, I did something different. I got smarter. I stopped chasing investors with half-baked ideas and pretty presentations. I learned to start from the bottom, to build something real before asking for money. I also stopped trusting people so easily. I reduced my circle to the minimum, basically Matt and a couple of loyal friends. I worked in silence, without talking too much about what I was doing. I also eliminated many distractions. I stopped spending time with people who only wanted to complain about life and focused solely on producing results. Matt was incredible during that whole time. He brought me coffee when I was coding until dawn. He made sure I ate something other than protein bars and never complained about me turning his living room into an improvised office. He even helped me land some interviews with contacts from his work when I was trying to close my first enterprise clients. That guy really deserves his own success story, and luckily, he got it too. Today, he is doing very well in his dream job and recently bought his first house. During the next 2 years, I completely disappeared from Caroline's life. She had no idea where I was, what I was doing, or if I was even still in the city. And being honest, there came a time when I simply stopped caring. While she played the perfect couple with Spencer, I was working harder than ever. My new startup idea was born precisely from my previous failures. Instead of trying to create another revolutionary consumer app, I decided to focus on business-to-business legal tech. More specifically, I worked on an artificial intelligence-powered contract analysis system capable of doing in seconds what took junior lawyers hours. It was not a glamorous project, and it was not the kind of thing people show off on social media, but it solved a real problem. It was a problem I myself had suffered from when trying to understand legal documents during my previous startup. And then, suddenly, everything changed. One day, our startup finally found the famous product-market fit. First came a viral mention in a major tech publication, then a testimonial from a large client that started opening doors for us. Suddenly, I was no longer struggling to survive. We were growing. Companies began contacting us directly. Even investors started calling us. And so the company everyone had mocked ended up competing directly with firms like Spencer's. Only he did not know it yet. 2 years. That is what it took. 2 years working in silence, endless workdays, and overcoming obstacle after obstacle. There were many times when I was on the verge of giving up, moments when I thought maybe Caroline and her family were right about me, but I kept going. Now I had an amazing team. These were people who believed in the vision and worked as hard as I did. Over time, they became something like a family. We had our inside jokes, our Friday afternoon beer ritual on the office terrace, and our war stories about pulling all-nighters coding to meet impossible deadlines. And then, almost without realizing it, everything started to fall into place. My startup was no longer just surviving. It was growing at a high speed. We had managed to close a deal with a huge client, one of the top 5 law firms in the country. That agreement opened many doors. More contracts started coming in, new investors arrived, and little by little, we gained recognition within the industry. In a matter of months, we were growing at an unexpected pace. We opened offices in London and Singapore. Everything seemed to be going faster than I ever imagined, but the real twist of fate came from somewhere else. Our biggest market disruption happened within the financial legal sector, exactly the same field Spencer worked in. The artificial intelligence tools we had developed were replacing a large part of the work normally done by junior associates in big law firms. That heavy and repetitive work had for years been the foundation of the careers of guys like Spencer. In other words, my company was directly threatening his firm's business model. And the most ironic part of all was that he did not even know who was behind it. The first time I saw Caroline again was completely by chance. It was during an exclusive industry event. But this time I was not there as a guest. I was one of the keynote speakers. A year earlier, I would not even have been able to afford the ticket to such an event. Now I was on stage explaining how our technology was changing the way legal services worked. When I finished my talk, I was greeting investors and executives. I was wearing a suit that, by the way, actually fit me perfectly this time. That was when I saw them. Caroline's parents were across the room. They looked different. They were less arrogant and less sure of themselves. They recognized me immediately. Caroline's mother widened her eyes in surprise, and her champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. Her father, the same one who years ago had mocked me at his table, simply gave me a slow nod. It was as if suddenly I deserved his respect. And then I saw her. Caroline was standing a bit apart, completely still, looking at me as if she had seen a ghost. Did she look good? Of course she did. She always looked good, but something was different. The confident smile she showed in her Instagram photos was not there. She did not approach me. I did not make any move to approach her either, but from a distance, I could see how her expression changed. First came surprise, then realization, and finally something that looked very much like regret. After that night, things only got worse for Caroline and Spencer. Their relationship was already in trouble. I later found out through some mutual friends that Spencer was exactly the kind of person he seemed to be. He was cold, obsessed with his public image, and quite controlling. He treated her more like an accessory than a partner. At first, Caroline had been fascinated by that life. She loved the luxury trips, the elegant dinners, and the perfect appearance for social media. But once the initial stage passed, the reality began to show. Spencer was almost never home. He was always working or networking, which apparently meant many long nights with colleagues, several of them women. Furthermore, he completely controlled the money. Caroline had no real access to anything on her own. He also had a say in how she should dress, how she should behave in public, and even who she could associate with. And the worst part of all was that her own parents always supported him. In that relationship, Caroline was no longer the prize. Spencer was. She had traded everything for security, and now she was trapped in a life that made her unhappy. The golden handcuffs were on tight. A few months later, I received an invitation from Caroline's father. He contacted me himself to invite me to a private business meeting. It was one of those high-level networking gatherings where influential people meet behind closed doors, drink wildly expensive whiskey, and make million-dollar deals. A few years ago, they would have laughed at the idea of inviting me. Now they wanted me to be there. I accepted, not because I needed their approval, but because I knew exactly why they were inviting me. My company was winning, and they wanted to be a part of that. I arrived at the event a few minutes late. Fashionably late, let's say, and there were Caroline and Spencer. Spencer did not look the same as before. He looked tense and stressed. He checked his phone constantly. His firm was having problems, and I knew perfectly well why. My company had captured a large part of their clientele. Our software did in minutes the work that normally required entire teams of junior associates, and at a fraction of the cost. Law firms were abandoning traditional methods to adopt our platform at a surprising speed. Maybe Spencer still did not know that I was the one responsible, but Caroline did. When our eyes met across the room, I understood it instantly. It was the same expression I had seen at the previous event, but this time more intense. It was regret, pure and clear. A week after the event, she reached out to me. I had deleted her number years ago, but her message came through anyway. Hi, it has been a long time. I was wondering if maybe we could see each other sometime, just to talk. I ignored it. The next day, she wrote again. I know things ended badly, but I have been thinking a lot lately. I miss our conversations. I left that message unanswered too, but then she did something desperate. She showed up at my office. It was around 8 at night. My team had already left, and I was finishing some emails when the receptionist called me. There is a woman here asking for you. She says it is important. I did not have to ask who it was. I thought about asking them to make her leave, but then I stopped. Maybe this was the moment that had arrived, so I told her to let her in. She walked in somewhat insecurely, looking around my corner office. It had huge floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. It was a very different place from the small apartment we had once shared. She looked completely different. The confidence she used to have had disappeared. The arrogant girl, who once insinuated that I was not on her level, was no longer there. Now she looked nervous, almost fragile. Hi, she said softly with a sad smile. It has been a long time. I leaned back in my chair with my arms crossed, watching her in silence as she shifted uncomfortably under my gaze. She hesitated for a few seconds, then took a deep breath. I made a mistake, she finally admitted. I listened too much to my family and ended up leaving something real for something that was not. She bit her lip as she searched for some reaction on my face. I miss you, she whispered. I miss what we had. I tilted my head slightly. What we had, I repeated. She nodded quickly, and for a moment, I saw hope in her eyes. I know I hurt you, she said, but maybe we could start over. I looked at her for several seconds, and then I laughed. Not with anger, not with resentment. I just found it ironic. Start over, I repeated, slowly shaking my head. Caroline, we ended the day you chose your family over me. She grimaced upon hearing that, but I was not done yet. You did not want me when I was broke. You did not believe in me either when I was struggling to get ahead. But now that I am doing well, now you want to come back. Her expression changed immediately. I stood up and adjusted my tailored suit jacket, this time made in a place as exclusive as the one Spencer used. Caroline, I no longer think about you. I do not miss you, and I definitely do not need you. Just then, as if it were the perfect scene to close that chapter, my office door opened. My girlfriend walked in. She is a brilliant product designer. I met her at a tech conference when my company was still running out of Matt's apartment. She was one of the few people who believed in the project when we were just starting out. Besides being smart, she is incredibly talented, and, honestly, she outshone Caroline in every aspect. Caroline's face went completely pale. I turned to my girlfriend and smiled naturally before looking back at Caroline. See, I told her, I found someone who actually is in my league. I paused for a moment. It turns out, it just was not you. After that, I walked her to the office door and closed it behind her. But that was not really the end. In fact, it was barely the beginning of the real downfall. A few weeks later, a rumor started going around that Spencer's firm was going through serious problems. It turns out that my company's AI-based legal tech was capturing clients at an impressive rate. Our service was faster, cheaper, and much more efficient. In minutes, we did tasks for which traditional law firms charged entire hours. Spencer's firm was losing money trying to compete. Their traditional methods no longer worked, but instead of adapting, the partners were starting to panic. Through some contacts, I found out that Spencer was losing his grip in private. He was working over 80 hours a week, desperately trying to keep his main clients. He yelled at the junior associates and took his frustration out on the staff. Meanwhile, investors were beginning to pull their money. More and more people saw his firm as an obsolete dinosaur in a market that had already changed. And the most ironic thing of all was that Spencer had not yet made the connection. He still did not know that I was the person behind the company that was destroying his business model. While he was falling apart at work, Caroline's parents also started getting nervous. For years, they had treated me like a penniless loser who did not deserve to be with their daughter. Now that same loser was richer, more influential, and more respected than many members of their own social circle. Suddenly, they wanted to act as if the past had never happened. It all started with small gestures. Caroline's mother sent me a polite email congratulating me on my success. Her father mentioned me in an interview, calling me one of the most promising entrepreneurs of the decade. They even invited me to another business event, presenting it as a simple networking opportunity. I ignored everything. Then, Caroline's father decided to call me directly. I answered purely out of curiosity. "I think we should talk, son," he said in a warm, fatherly tone, as if we had not been at odds for years. I let him talk. He started mentioning potential business opportunities, future collaborations, and things from the past that no longer mattered. Then he paused and finally said what he really wanted to say. "Look, Caroline made a mistake. We all know it. She has been going through a hard time, and I think if you two sat down to talk." I hung up before he finished the sentence. There were no real apologies. He did not take any responsibility. It was just a desperate attempt at damage control. That was the last time I answered their calls. The moment he finally discovered that I was behind the company affecting his firm was memorable. I was participating in a fairly important business conference, speaking on a panel about the future of artificial intelligence in law. During the discussion, the CEO of a large firm said publicly, "Honestly, these companies are changing the rules of the game. Even some of the largest law firms are having a hard time keeping up." The camera panned to the audience, and there was Spencer. His face had completely lost its color. His expression was a mix of shock and growing horror. At that moment, he understood. I was not just Caroline's loser ex-boyfriend. I was the man who was destroying his career. That same night, something else happened. A mutual contact sent me a message. "Dude, Spencer just lost his mind at a firm meeting. You have to hear this." Apparently, During a strategy session, one of the partners mentioned my company as an example of the competition they had to face. Spencer exploded, slammed the table, started yelling at his own bosses, and claimed that I was nothing more than a lucky fraud. He insisted that my company would end up failing. The problem was that no one in that room was laughing with him. They looked at him as if he had completely lost his mind. Everyone was starting to realize something I already knew. Spencer was not the future. I was. I could have left the story there, but I still had one last move left. A few months later, my company was preparing for the largest acquisition up to that point. We were going to buy a smaller but very influential law firm, and coincidentally, it was one of the main competitors of Spencer's firm. This was not just a business move. It was checkmate. Once the deal closed, several of Spencer's most important clients switched to our platform. His firm's situation worsened rapidly. In just 6 months, they had to merge with another company to survive. Spencer stopped being a partner. He was no longer an important boss. Now he was just another employee, probably doing the same kind of heavy lifting he previously bragged about having escaped. And Caroline had ended up married to a man whose career was nosediving. In the same way she left me looking for security, she was now stuck with someone who had lost everything. I, on the other hand, had won, not only professionally but also personally. I had rebuilt my life from scratch, created something that really mattered, and found happiness my way. The last time I saw Caroline was in a rather unexpected place. It was an airport VIP lounge. I was waiting for my flight to Tokyo. We were going to expand the company into the Asian market, and I had a schedule full of meetings. While I was in the airport lounge, I saw her. Caroline was sitting alone, looking at her phone. Something about her had changed. She was no longer wearing designer bags or flashy jewelry. Her appearance was different, more tired, and more subdued. She even looked older than I remembered. The perfect life she had always wanted had clearly taken its toll. At one point, she looked up and saw me. For a second, her eyes lit up with something that looked like hope. She stood up slowly, as if she were thinking of approaching. I simply shook my head. Then I turned around, walked to the boarding gate for my first-class flight, and kept going without looking back. In the end, I did not need to ruin Caroline's life. She had done it herself. She traded a real love for status, and over time, that status disappeared. Spencer, who was once the perfect provider in the eyes of her family, was now just another lawyer with a damaged reputation trying to stay afloat. The glamorous life they had built ended up reduced to something quite ordinary. Meanwhile, I finally had everything I had worked for over the years. My company had become a major force within the industry. I had real friends, a life I built from scratch, and a relationship with someone who really believed in me from the beginning. I never responded to Caroline's last messages. I also did not react to her discreet attempts to reconnect with me, because in the end, I understood something important. The best revenge was not destroying her life. The best revenge was simply living mine better, happier, and without her. TLDR, my girlfriend left me because her rich family thought I was not successful enough. 2 years later, my startup accidentally ended up destroying her new boyfriend's career, and I got to watch the perfect life they chose begin to crumble while mine finally thrived. Edit, wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the awards and comments. Answering some questions that are repeated a lot. Yes, I am still with my amazing girlfriend. We have been together for about 1.5 years now. Max, my cat, is also still with me. He is now living his best life in our pet-friendly office, and the company continues to grow. Oh, and no, I do not feel bad about what happened to Spencer. Edit 2. For those asking if this story is fake, I wish it were. I changed some details to protect the privacy of the people involved, but the main story is completely real. Sometimes life really does feel like the end of a movie. Comment. I hope this story reminds you that your worth is never defined by someone else's opinion of your bank account. When you focus on building your own path with integrity, you stop seeking validation from people who were never meant to be in your life. Setting clear boundaries is not about being cold, but about protecting your peace and your potential. It is truly remarkable what happens when you pour that energy into your own growth instead of chasing those who walked away. True success is not found in settling scores or watching others struggle. Real victory is reaching a place where you are finally at peace with who you have become. Please remember that you deserve to be with people who saw your value when you had nothing. Your time is far too precious to spend on those who demand you shrink yourself to fit their narrow expectations. Keep working on your dreams and let the results speak for themselves. You are capable of building a life so fulfilling that the past simply fades into the background. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.